Hot air balloons in Ukraine and the world. Modern aeronautics as a sport, recreation and a festival spectacle. Things you should know and skills you should have to fly a hot air balloon. UATV went to visit a school of pilots to find out what gives a person the skills to become a hot air balloon aeronaut. Everyone knows that the first aeronauts in history were the French Montgolfier brothers, Joseph Michel and Jacques Etienne. But as is often the case with well-known facts, that is not entirely true. Indeed, these two paper makers invented and designed the first aircraft that used the lifting force of hot air. But none of the Montgolfier brothers dared to go on free flight in their balloon. Technically, the first balloonists were a rooster, a ram and a duck, which were taken to an altitude of almost 2 kilometers for the sake of experimenting on September 19, 1783. None of the animals suffered any harm upon landing. Then King Louis XVI wanted to launch 2 criminals into the sky, but was persuaded to not do that. In the end, on November 21, 1783, 2 now little-known people, Marquis François Laurent Darland and chemistry teacher Pilote de Rosier, became the first astronauts in history to set off in free flight. The latter really wanted to cross the English Channel in a hot air balloon, but it was not possible to take enough fuel at the time. As a result, Pilote de Rosier assembled his hybrid aircraft with one cylinder filled with warm air and the other with hydrogen. Unfortunately, at the very beginning of the flight on June 15, 1785, the envelope folded over land and both pilots died. 200 years later, the descendants of Pilote de Rosier founded the Aeronautic organization that now hosts the world's largest hot air balloon festival known as Mondial Air Balloons. Every summer, it gathers thousands of pilots and hundreds of thousands of viewers from all over the world in France. Every year, they try to set a new record for the simultaneous takeoff of hot air balloons. As of 2018, the record is 456 balloons. But the question is, why do people continue to get involved with limited steering and slow flights in the modern age of high-tech, super-fast aviation and space exploration? Ballooning is very cool. First of all, it is interesting because it is spectacular. Secondly, ballooning gives people extraordinary emotions. They bring pleasure to everyone standing inside the basket and everyone who watches the balloons flying over them from the ground. Serhiy Skalko, similar to Pilote de Rosier, is a ballooning enthusiast. He founded the Kyiv Aeronautical Society and the only thermal airship pilot school in Ukraine. To promote the sport and hobby, Serhiy and like-minded fans of this sport hold the festival Montgolfier annually, and not only in their home country. We were invited to Montenegro, and then were invited to Bulgaria. We're trying to combine aeronautics with cultural events, film screenings and circus art. We constantly invent new records to draw the attention of as many people as possible to the exhilarating sport of hot air ballooning in Ukraine. Why did an experienced military aircraft pilot suddenly get interested in hot air balloons? What do you need to do to rise to the sky in your own balloon, and how difficult is it really? And finally, what unique records have Ukrainian aeronauts set? Stay tuned to this program to hear the interesting answers to these questions. Historically, the military were the first to find aeronautics useful. Tethered aerostats were used for recon missions, although it wasn't possible to make them steerable or independent of the wind direction for over 100 years after the invention of the Montgolfier brothers. Airships were the solution to this problem, but they turned out to be too unreliable for war and passenger transportation in the end. Hot air balloons, however, found a second wind with the advent of new materials and compact gas burners since the mid-20th century. Modern aeronautics as a hobby and sport was formed mainly in the US. In the Soviet Union, when Serhiy Skalko was young, this hobby was completely inaccessible. He was born into the family of a Ukrainian military pilot. Serhiy had the opportunity to learn to fly such military aircraft as the MiG-29 and Tu-154. When I'd been working at the Borispol airport, I saw hot air balloons flying across the sky. I had already been an experienced pilot and even an Air Force captain, if I remember correctly, but I had no clue where hot air balloons took off from, how they flew and what exactly they were. Could something like a hot air balloon really impress a pilot like Serhiy? He recalls how in 2000, at a festival in Crimea, he was totally overwhelmed by such irrational admiration for those types of aircraft. I was a 30-year-old young man running across fields, waist deep in grass, and covered in mud and dew, taking photos of these amazing aircraft. That lasted several years. I was part of a team, and I constantly came across people who were charged with that energy and adrenaline to fulfill their dreams of flying in a hot air balloon. Serhiy got his pilot license when he was 36 in the only Ukrainian aeronautics school in Crimea, which later closed down. He had spent a lot of time flying just for fun, but then he took part in a sports event and realized that Ukraine needed to create a platform for more accessible training for the masses. Today, our pilot school graduates 2 or 3 groups a year, which can be as much as 25 students. Especially for UATV, Serhiy tells viewers how to learn to fly hot air balloons and how much time and resources you need to invest in modern ballooning. How it's made. The Ukrainian School of Thermal Airship Pilots, which is how professionals call hot air balloons, is located in just a few small buildings outside of Kiev. They have all the amenities that one needs: classrooms, a hangar, and even a sewing workshop for envelope repairs. It is the only such educational institution in the post-Soviet countries, aside from another school in Lithuania that graduates pilots with internationally recognized certificates. Cadet Alisher Gulyamov traveled thousands of kilometers to study here. I came from Uzbekistan, from the city of Tashkent. I'm already an ultra-light aviation pilot, but I decided to learn to fly in another type of aircraft. We want to open and develop the same type of aeronautics school in Uzbekistan. That's right, thermal airships are also aircraft, like single-engine planes or huge jet airliners. They have registered tail numbers and must pass annual technical inspections. It is, however, such a specific aircraft that experienced pilots study almost on par with total beginners. First of all, you have to pass through a specialized course on theory. It takes 92 hours, which is roughly 10 days. Classes begin early in the morning and go until late in the evening, with a lunch break in between. There are 11 subjects such as aerodynamics, design and operation, meteorology, radio telephony, and aviation safety. Flying a hot air balloon in strong wind from 5 meters per second and in poor visibility is unsafe, since you can smash into a tree, a building, or what's worse, in a power line. There's also a risk of burning a hole in the envelope during the summer heat when trying to warm up the air to get some lift force, since the key condition is the temperature difference between the inside and the outside. So if the maximum temperature the envelope can take is 124 degrees, we often take off at 110 to 115 degrees in the summer. And if you are in the middle of a maneuver, if you are slowing down and you need to gain altitude very quickly, then you are forced to overheat it. That's why we try to fly less when the temperatures are exceedingly high, as they can pose a serious danger to the flight. Today, hot air balloons used in Ukraine are produced in the UK, Spain, Germany, and the Czech Republic. Only the inlet, which is the closest to the burner flame, is made of fire-resistant materials. The envelope is usually made of polyamide fabrics, which can melt under direct exposure to heat, but are very good at retaining heat. At the highest point of the envelope, there is usually a vent for releasing hot air. In most cases, baskets are woven from rattan, which grows in Asia. It turns out they are light and durable, but most importantly, they are good at distributing energy during a rough landing. The whole set, together with the burner, costs about as much as 2 middle-class European cars. At the same time, just like 200 years ago, wind is the only thing that propels such aircraft. Every time the takeoff location is determined with an auxiliary balloon, whereby the pilots choose such a spot so that the hot air balloons will not be blown out of the flight zone. There are 2 airports in Kiev, Zhylyany and Boryspil, the operation of which can be inadvertently disrupted if you don't correctly calculate the wind speed. Changing altitude to catch the right airflow is the only way to steer a hot air balloon. Balloonist competitions are built on this principle. It is a whole new level of mastery and organization. Judges built a route based on the latest weather data, which pilots must repeat as precisely as possible. When the balloon is in the air, your meteorological service keeps launching probes all the time, watching where they go and where they turn at what altitudes, and then send that information to the pilot. All pilots have a computer with them, which stores all the targets in restricted areas. They're given ground targets and markers, which they have to throw at those targets. The area of a target can be 15 meters, for example. Sports hot air balloons are more elongated compared to ordinary ones. Such shape allows for faster change of altitude, up to 12 meters per second. Serhiy has represented the Ukrainian national team many times with a balloon like this, but the team has not yet managed to take a high place in international championships. He says that the strongest school of professional pilots is currently in the US, but he does not lose hope in improving the level of Ukrainian pilots. However, that requires as many people as possible to engage in ballooning as a hobby. That means that thermal airships need to be mentioned in the headlines of respected newspapers. Our first record was lifting 36 people into the skies in a hot air balloon. My friend from Georgia and I also planned to fly over the Black Sea. We ordered a beautiful large balloon for that purpose with a volume of 14,200 cubic meters and 4.5 tons of carrying capacity. Its basket was almost 6 by 2 meters in size. The balloon with 36 people did take off, but the manufacturer did not allow the Ukrainians to fly it over the Black Sea for safety reasons. Despite that, the flight of 32 people in the UK in 2014 to this day holds the official world record. Then Serhiy decided to involve parachutists. Jumping from a hot air balloon even from an altitude of 4,000 meters is difficult. While an airstream immediately takes you away when you jump from a plane, with balloons you still need to gain some speed. On top of that, even just a few parachutists can inadvertently bring down the balloon itself. When the balloon loses weight, it starts going upwards. Finally, fairly recently, in 2017, Serhiy Skalko came up with the most spectacular stunt in the history of Ukrainian aeronautics. That was when Stanislav Panuta walked a tightrope between two hot air balloons, which was also fairly difficult. That was at an altitude of 660 meters, and keeping a horizontal flight of two balloons so that the rope would be tight enough was also an extremely difficult record to set. Today, there are about 70 thermal airship pilots in Ukraine, while modern aeronautics started developing in the country in the 1990s. However, there is no domestic production at all. Currently, Serhiy Skalko is trying to raise funds through crowdfunding to create a new advanced balloon especially for the Ukrainian team of hot air balloonists. The design of the balloon is very aesthetic. It is done in the national colors of Ukraine, blue and yellow, with the emblem of aviation of the Ukrainian People's Republic, which turned 100 years old last year. It's going to be a reliable, highly maneuverable and safe balloon. But the main result for Serhiy is seeing the sparkle in the eyes of people who have gained their first aeronautical experience. People who have flown with us become completely different. They reboot completely, realize how beautiful the Earth is and how exhilarating such flights were in the blue skies over Ukraine's yellow wheat fields.